So how do we construct a histogram? Well, let's look at an example. So we're going to consider the height of 20 college students. And when I write down these heights, I'm going to write them from smallest to largest. This makes it easier to construct the histogram. So here are the heights. Hopefully this is 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so here we are. So in constructing a histogram, we have to determine how many class intervals we're going to be using. So we need to determine the number of class intervals and the width of class intervals. How do we do this? Well, first thing we have to do is we have to know how many data values we have, and we see that we have 20 data values, so we know that n is 20. We also have to determine what the range of values is. To do that, we have to know what the smallest value is, which is here, which is 48. And the largest value, which is 70. And then the range of values is simply the largest minus the smallest, which is going to be 22. Also, we have to realize that typically when we're constructing a histogram, we want the average number of values to be between 3 and 5. So the average number of values per class interval we want to be between 3 and 5. So now that we have all this information, we can determine the number of class intervals and the width of the class intervals. Okay? Now the number of class intervals is equal to the range, which in this case is 22. No, it's equal to the number of data values, which is 20, divided by the average number of values per class interval. Well, let's go ahead, and since 4 is kind of in the middle, we're going to divide this by 4, and we're going to get 5 class intervals. So when we construct our histogram, we want to have 5 class intervals. Now that we know the number of class intervals, then we can determine the width of each class interval. by simply taking the range, which is 22, dividing by the number of class intervals, which gives us a value of 4.4. Now, when we're determining the width of a class interval, we don't want that width to typically be a number which has a 0.4 in it. We like this to usually be either an integer, for example, like 4, or possibly something that's like 4.5. That just makes the calculations easier when we construct the class interval. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our width of our class interval be 4. Now that we know how many class intervals we're going to need and the width of each class interval, we can construct it's called our summary table. So in the summary table, we're going to have the class intervals here, and we're also going to have the frequency. So the first class interval is going to go from the smallest number up to a number which is 4 bigger than 48. So that's going to take us to 52. So the first class interval starts at 48, which is our smallest value, and has a width of 4. Okay. Next one starts at 52, goes up by 4. We just continue this. And we do this until the last interval contains our largest value. So our smallest value is in the first class interval right here, and our largest value, which is here, is going to be in the last class interval. Now what we do is we go through the data and we count how many values are in each class interval. Understanding that when we're counting those values to get the frequency, that we want to count values that are in this interval that may include 48 but exclude the 52. You'll see that 52, for example, is occurring in 2 class intervals. So what we're going to do is if the value is 52, we're not going to put it in the first class interval, we're going to put it in the second class interval. So in general, if the value is equal to the top value of the interval, we put it in the next class. So we're looking for everything between 48 and 52, excluding 52. If we look at that, we see we get this right here. So those values right there are in our first class interval. We'll see that there are 2 of them. Then we go from 52 to 56, excluding 56, we see there are 2 there. 56 to 60, excluding 60, we see there are 2 there. From 60 to 64, excluding 64, we see there are 3 there. From 64 all the way up to 68, excluding 68, there's 5 there. Finally, 68, sorry, this should be 68 to 72. So we made a mistake here. This last class interval there should go up to 72. See that there was 6, right? 6. As a check, when we add all these together, we should get 20, which we do. Now what we're going to do is we want to take the information in our summary table, and we want to use that to construct our histogram. So here we go. So we draw our axes. We're going to label this one as the height, and this one over here as the frequency. If you look at the frequencies for the class intervals, you see that 6 is the largest value, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to mark off the vertical axis so that it includes, so that at the height of this vertical axis we have the largest frequency, and then we just break it into units. Now we're going to go from 48. So now we have to mark off our class intervals, and we just do that by using the values here. So the first class interval goes from 48 to 52. So we're going to write those on this axis. And 52 to 56, we're going to write those. 60, 64, 68, 72. Now, for the first class interval, which goes from 48 to 52, we have two values, so we're going to go ahead and make a little rectangle there, which has a height of 2. Put a number 2 there. Next one, it goes from 52 to 56. 2, 2, 3, 5, finally 6. And this is called a frequency histogram. And if you look at the histogram, you notice that the heights are tending toward the larger values. We have a lot of people who have heights between 60 and 72 or 70 inches.